I think at Soul Jazz, they're a lot more kind of practical, it's functional, it's versatile clothing. Whereas at Coachella, the commitment to the look was there. Like, they were not thinking about functionality. Me and Jaeyeon were laughing because we were seeing girls walking around in like platform, like high heels. When you're trekking across the desert, I can tell you that is not comfortable. Not when you're doing like 20,000 steps a day. Or there was people that were in like leather trousers, leather shirts. And I would take that picture and be like, are you not really hot? And they're like, I'm actually boiling, but it looks great. And I thought, you know what? Fair play. The commitment to the look is there.
That's Mia Jacobs, youth fashion strategist at WGSN, talking about festival fashion. You're listening to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow. I'm your host, Kraggy, Senior Commissioning Manager at WGSN. And today, it's all about festival fashion. We'll be discussing the emerging styles, subcultures, consumer drivers, and aesthetics within youth fashion that we've been tracking from festivals across the globe. With peak festival season fast approaching for many of us, we're taking this time to reflect on what we've seen and our forecast for this year's festival season. Joining me today for this WGSN guide to festival fashion are youth fashion strategist Mia Jacobs from London. Hey Mia, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all very well, thank you. And Jaeyeon Park, calling in from Seoul. Hi Jaeyeon.
Hi.
Okay, so WGSN has actually already begun its festival coverage. In fact, we sort of don't really ever stop. With our global outreach, we capture and analyze street style looks all year round, and we create roundups from festivals across the globe. In fact, we've already had coverage from locations such as Dubai, Lagos, Nigeria, with the Homecoming Festival, Primavera in Spain, many London shows, Seoul, and of course, Coachella. Jaeyeon and Mia went this year as well. And Jaeyeon, this was your first time. What were your sort of like first impressions attending this festival that's sort of arguably one of the most talked about and debated festivals within the fashion industry?
So prior to our trip, despite all the comments saying how Coachella is not the way it was before and the tickets didn't sell out, I mean, I was really impressed. It was so huge and packed with people. I still think Coachella is the place where you can like really feel that youthful energy, and there's music, there's culture and food, and of course fashion. I don't think it can really be replaced with anything else. And obviously, as a fashion strategist, it was really nice to see the different aesthetics that we've been talking about in the past come to life and really have that confirmation that we were on the right track. So overall, it was an amazing experience.
Oh, I'm so glad. I have to say, I was pretty gutted not to go this time. It is such an experience, and the people you meet, the festival itself, and the fashion is just incredible. I'm so glad that you found it beneficial as well, because, the headlines were talking about the slowing of ticket sales, scale back commitments from brands and influencers alike, and the festival generally having a bit of a identity crisis, maybe because it's that crossover from Gen Z to millennial audience as well. Mia, maybe you could help me cut through the headlines here because you were also on the ground. What do you think the cultural weight of these festivals have? Do they have some still, and what's their relevance within the fashion industry?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think they absolutely still do have cultural relevance. And coming back from Coachella definitely confirmed that for me. I mean, I'll admit I was a little bit skeptical as well before we went. I was thinking, is it going to be the same as last year? Is it going to live up to expectations? But 100% it did. And I think what's, so important about particularly these more like commercial festivals where they have such kind of diverse lineup in terms of like musical genres is that you really get to see that cross section of youth, but in a concentrated space. So you can see those distinct style groupings coming out and the different subcultures. And I think there's nowhere else really that you get to see it in like I said, such a concentrated space. But we do have these festivals that if you're looking for more of a deep dive into particular aesthetics, that you could go for more of a niche festival. So for example, Stagecoach, that happens like the weekend after Coachella, and that's all about country and Western music. So obviously you kind of know what to expect when you go there. As you mentioned, we've also covered Homecoming in Lagos, Nigeria, which is amazing. Our first year covering it. I highly recommend going into our Street Style library and checking that out. But that's kind of like a multidisciplinary festival. So it covers music, art, culture. They have loads of pop-up shops, and they do amazing collaborations with streetwear brands from like your Pata, your Stussy, Ambush, to these more kind of not even emerging, significant African-owned streetwear brands like Ashlux, Waffles and Cream. So it's super, super important for the streetwear scene.
That's great. Yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said for these festivals that combine cultural activities together, whether it's the music, DIY stations, festival and fashion coming together to be one hub, so one sort of creative hub. And I really liked your point about the specifics as well, because obviously subcultures is a thing that's talked about so much in youth culture at the moment and youth fashion. And I know last year when we went to Field Day, we saw a different audience, every headliner. But then these general festivals, they have such a melting pot of styles. Jaeyeon, I was wondering if you could take me through some of the key themes that emerged this year at the festival.
Well, obviously, like Western Americana theme has always been there with Coachella in the past because, I mean, it's taking place in the middle of the desert in Southern California, so it makes sense. But especially this year, this Western and Bohemian theme just skyrocketed. It was honestly so hard on the first day to spot someone not wearing cowboy boots or Bohemian themed dressing.
A classic for the festival, right?
Yeah, but it was like more amplified this year, and we were wondering like what would be the reason. And obviously there were hints like previously from Autumn Winter 24 catwalks. There was a big comeback in Western and Bohemian looks from like Chloe or Louis Vuitton. And also we thought country music was just so fast growing. It was in fact the fastest growing music genre in the US last year, driven by Gen Z. So there is like this evidence where Western and Bohemian is growing, and that was really reflected on the festival ground. But also what was really nice to see in this festival is that this theme was more diversified than the past, particularly across menswear. We saw this young men experimenting with decorative elements and really like challenging the gender norms. So overall, it's really exciting to see this shift because we've been seeing Y2K for the longest time. And now we're finally entering to 2010's Tumblr era.
Oh, it's back. Oh, my word.
Back with a bang.
Yeah, I can dig out my old blogs again. That's really interesting because a lot of the themes you mentioned at the start of that are sort of, I would call them Coachella classics in a way, that boho stuff. And it's like people, maybe since the rise of TikTok, and there's been a lot of talk about the trend cycle and how quickly some of these short-term trends die out. Perhaps the pendulum is finally swinging back to tried and tested aesthetics instead. Mia, do you think this is a bit of a rejection of those short-lived trends? Are they burning out too quickly? Is this the end of the cause, or do they still have a place on the field?
Yeah, this is a very debatable topic, I think. You know, Western, obviously, as Jaeyeon said, it is a classic. It's an easy go-to. You know you're going to fit in if you kind of tap into this style for Coachella in particular. But what I think is important here when we mention subcultures and aesthetics is just to define what they are, because I think recently they've become such buzzwords and people kind of use them interchangeably, and actually they have very different meanings. We have just done a really great report on Insight on youth subcultures for 2025, where we kind of do a deep dive into all of the key subcultures that we've identified. But we have kind of classified it as a subculture is like a community which is bonded through shared lifestyles, belief systems, and attitudes. And they kind of communicate this through visual cues. But then an aesthetic is more interchangeable. So it's just a set of visual codes that signify an association or affiliation with a specific trend or a style group. So people jump in and out of different aesthetics all the time. And I think what we start to see at festivals is kind of like branches of these different aesthetics, which are inspired by the subcultures, but people don't really live through them, if that makes sense. So, for example, we called out the reverie escapist as a subculture, which is emerging from the kind of like cottagecore ecosystem. It's kind of inspired by like folklore and myths, and we saw so much of the kind of like coquettecore coming through. So that is an aesthetic that's kind of spawned from the reverie escapists, and also the subversive romantics as well. We called those out, and they are a subcultural group that's influenced by like fashion, beauty, and music from the 1990s and emo and grunge scenes. And we saw so much of that coming through at the festival as well.
I am interested though, because it's sometimes a bit hard to imagine how all of these might translate globally, right? This is very much a demographic in Coachella for sure that are comfortable exploring these trends. And Jaeyeon, you mentioned earlier that the 2010s might be overtaking the Y2K stuff. Is this something we're seeing globally? And are we finally going to see an aesthetic like kill the Y2K movement? Or is it just another iteration of it?
So, I mean, Y2K was so dominant. We were actually having a discussion about this yesterday within our like trends days. And we started talking about Y2K. We predicted it back in 2017. And here we are 8 years later, still talking about it. It's kind of on its way out now. But I think trends are now a lot more kind of fragmented, and we're seeing them happen in tandem. Whereas I think Y2K was such a moment that it was like unmissable because everyone was tapping into it at the same time. But I think in terms of what we're seeing kind of globally happen, like Jaeyeon mentioned, we've got the new indie. So that shift from Y2K, the trend cycle's getting slightly shorter. And we're now reminiscing about the 2010s, 2014 Tumblr era. It's that very like unrefined, eclectic kind of indie sleaze look. You've got your 90s grunge, so those darker aesthetics inspired by skate culture, all the oversized silhouettes. And I think the shift to thrift is still so important for youth. Like that is not going anywhere. And they're really inspired by these like nostalgic aesthetics.
And on top of that, there was this big DIY movement. So many people told me on the festival grounds saying like they had customized their looks or even made everything from scratch. And one of our favorites was these baggy shorts with this patchwork at the back saying, "I'm just a girl." And it was so funny and cute.
Yeah, I was honestly obsessed. I was like, I would buy those off you right now if you would let me. I'm trying to convince Jaeyeon to make me a pair of those pants. So I'm expecting those in the post, Jaeyeon.
Okay, for your birthday present next time.
Thanks. But yeah, that links quite nicely to also the pretty feminine themes that we have really seen kind of across the globe. Last year was dubbed Year of the Girl. Where is it going to go next? We are loving all of these like hyper feminine, more exaggerated, over the top kind of styles. And then also another big one, I think, is sportcore. We have seen that across all of the festivals that we've covered so far globally. So yeah, that's definitely a key one there.
Okay, sportcore. Tell me more about this. I'm intrigued. What does that include? Is it proper footballer or is it agnostic to any particular sport? What's going on here?
Yeah, okay. So I think sportcore is also such a global trend because obviously we participate in sport across the globe. It's something that we can kind of all relate to. And this is something, again, that we've been tracking since 2019 on the feed. More recently, we've been seeing kind of like the blokecore trend bubble up. That was actually coined by an American TikToker in 2021, actually. But it is inspired by football culture from the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. And that kind of terrace culture has always been synonymous with streetwear anyway. But I think it's been adopted en masse in recent years. We've seen so many brands tapping into this with the kind of the football jerseys, the retro tracksuits, all of those kind of things. And it's become a much more kind of commercial trend. And we've seen loads of variations of this like play out across social media as well.
Yeah, for a young woman especially, there's this fun in mixing like traditionally more masculine sportswear with like hyper feminine items. And this is mostly known as bloquecore. It's kind of like bloquecore, which essentially is like bloquecore plus coquette. And there were so many football jerseys paired with like frilled bloomers and bows on tracksuits. And this was also really widely seen in Seoul as well. But because soccer has been in the center for so long, we really now want to see more diverse range of sports. And in our youth drivers report, we highlighted extreme sports, for example, like motocross and, of course, Formula One. So yeah, we are anticipating more like diversified sportswear combined into like day-to-day casual looks.
That's so interesting. I love the more extreme sports coming through. I don't know if this is something that I've just seen or you're seeing too, but I keep seeing sort of wrestling style apparel coming through, even if it's just like a little hint on a high sort of waistline, the shorts, or even a graphic or something as well.
The boxing boots are making a comeback as well. I have to point that out.
Yeah, really?
Yes.
Wow. I don't know if they'd be that comfortable. Surely not.
Well, now they're smart and they have zips on the side rather than having to lace up your entire shoe. So they're a bit more practical to put on your feet.
I actually have one, like vintage Puma ones.
Do you?
Do you? And you have to lace them all the way up?
No, they have zippers.
Oh, they have a zip? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Amazing.
There you go. They've
Love
already
that.
thought of it. That's great. But Formula One, are we all going to be in sort of one pieces walking around? How does that translate?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many collabs recently. I have to admit, I'm obsessed with Drive to Survive. But some of the style that comes out of that is great. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is a bit of a champion on the street style scene. So I think we all need to watch this space for Formula One.
And I guess there's a bit of functionality with sportwear and activewear as well. And that was a big topic that we were talking about last year. People really wanting to dress appropriately rather than go too out of their comfort zone. Is that still the case this time? Is there a versatility aspect to this as well?
Yeah, I think the sports aesthetics just naturally lends well with functionality and comfort. But then there's like 90s minimalism or like easy dressing that's not sportswear, but also it is very comfort driven and very elevated too for formal settings. So this, and we thought, is really big in Seoul too, because people tend to like favor more versatile looks. So not only sportswear, but the sort of elevated minimalistic dressing is suitable for festivals and like outside of festivals too. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, are there any sort of specific items, maybe Mia, if you've got any in mind, that you would say are must-haves for this sort of look as well, for this versatility?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, in terms of sportcore, it is like your jerseys, your tracksuits, 90s minimalism. There was a lot of just simple kind of wide leg baggy jeans with plain vest. There was loads of that simple. It was all kind of like oversized, more relaxed kind of silhouettes. But I think it's key to say that it depends on the festival that you're at in terms of the level of functionality. And I think that's a big difference between the festivals so far that we've seen. I think at Seoul Jazz, they're a lot more kind of practical, it's functional, it's versatile clothing. Whereas at Coachella, the commitment to the look was there. Like, they were not thinking about functionality. Me and Jaeyeon were laughing because we were seeing girls walking around in like platform, like high heels. When you're trekking across the desert, I can tell you that is not comfortable. Not when you're doing like 20,000 steps a day. Or there was people that were in like leather trousers, leather shirts. And I would take their picture and be like, are you not really hot? And they're like, I'm actually boiling. but it looks great. And I thought, you know what, fair play, the commitment to the look is there. So yeah, it's very kind of weather dependent as well. You obviously know you're going to get great weather when you're in the desert, so that kind of doesn't limit your outfit choices as much in comparison to in the UK. You could be in the middle of a torrential downpour, so you're kind of forced to dress slightly more practically than you would be, you know, in the US. So I think that is something that plays into it as well, the weather conditions.
You're listening to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow. We're talking about festival fashion, looking at the emerging styles and aesthetics. I'm your host, Kraggy, Senior Commissioning Manager at WGSN, and I'm joined by WGSN Youth Fashion Strategist Mia Jacobs and Jaeyeon Park. Okay, Jaeyeon, back to you. Last year, we talked about the influence of arena tours and how artists are inspiring the way that fans are dressing. We discussed this extensively in our Youth Drivers report, actually, for the season. How are you seeing this play out for festivals this year?
Yeah, definitely. Fandom dressing was the thing this year compared to last year. People were dressing according to the headliners, basically. So on the first day, Lana Del Rey was performing, and so many young women were dressed in this ethereal, feminine boho dressing. And the funny part is, actually, Lana Del Rey didn't really dress up like the signature Lana Del Rey. And it's just interesting how people have this image of the star like so engraved in their minds and try to like pay homage to the stars and their celebrities. So yeah, it was really interesting to watch that.
They've still got Tumblr Lana in their mind's
yeah,
eye.
see it in their brains.
Absolutely.
For young men as well, we saw so many, we coined them as mini Tylers walking around, because obviously Tyler, the Creator, was headlining on one of the days, and his influence was like so clear to see. And you know what, it's actually really refreshing because I think it's a much more like expressive take on streetwear. There's super kind of like bold, playful looks, lots of like kidult styling with the kind of like the cute backpacks and the like furry hats. And he's also quite synonymous with the like redefining masculinity movement as well, which is super important for youth. So young men in general were just a lot more kind of experimental with their looks, I think, particularly this year. As I say, yeah, was really nice and kind of exciting to see.
Amazing. So what are the key opportunities for our brands here to get ahead of the future of festival fashion? Mia, maybe I could start with you very quickly. What would you advise?
I believe we're just going to continue to see these like amplified versions of aesthetics that we see on the street, but just in one space. So people are really going to like ramp up these looks. So in terms of like what brands can do, it's about maintaining their awareness of what is happening with different like youth subcultures throughout the year. So continuing to track these different style groups and see how they're like evolving and what's happening with these aesthetics. So they're already kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to festival season. They know almost what to expect.
Yeah, and also brands can leverage this fandom culture and tap into Gen Z's desires for sense of community and belonging, which we've been talking about in the past for a long time. And create this collection just beyond making merchandise items. So like identify the headliners in advance, and based on their style, curate festival edits. And that way they can expand also consumer base and not only cater to fans, but more general youth. So that's opportunity there.
Yeah, that's a super important one, Jaeyeon. I think where we are seeing such a heavy influence of artists and their style on their fandoms, it's almost a kind of easy win. And I think with that as well, the reason why a lot of young people are opting to dress like the artists that they kind of love is that it almost takes a little bit of the thought out of it, because you've got a blueprint already of the kind of outfit that you're going to go through. So you don't have to think of the stress of like, oh, what am I going to wear to a festival? You're just going to think, what would Lana wear? You just need channel your inner Lana and there's your outfit. So I think, yeah, it's quite an easy way to dress for a festival, actually. And I think brands can really capitalize on that. And then just a final point that I want to make is that we do have to be conscious that we are sadly in a cost of living crisis. We all have less disposable income. And just with sustainability in mind as well, that it's quite key that brands prioritize those products that have multiple end uses. We picked up on this in our last festival podcast, if you had a listen, and it still remains just as important today that you really need to showcase how they can style products for various occasions. So from a festival to a holiday to a beach party, how can people get the most wear out of their clothes? And I think this is something that people are really going to be looking for when they're buying into those key items. So we need to, shift away from that more disposable element of festival fashion.
That's an excellent point, and actually something that was discussed on one of the last podcasts as well with Sarah Maggioni on travel and the versatility and multifunctionality of a lot of that holiday and vacation wear as well. So yeah, that's a really great point, Mia. I just want to end on a bit of a fun one. Seems like a bit of a tradition now on these podcasts. So I'll start with Jaeyeon. What are you going to wear to your next festival? And a new one. Are you going to wear your comfies, your trainers, or your cowboy boots? Or should I say wrestling boots now, actually? Be honest.
Last time when I went to Coachella, I almost felt like I was stressed down because everybody was just going crazy, like over the top. So this year, definitely, I'll probably pick out one key trend that I forecasted and then go full with that
full
aesthetic. Yeah, full out with that aesthetic. And that means I'll probably gonna choose cowboy boots.
We love that.
Style over comfort for me.
You know what? I would love to say that, but considering in the UK we're meant to have the wettest summer since 1920, I think I'm probably going to have to wear like a raincoat and wellies. Like, sadly, I'm going, what is it? Substance over style this time. I'm going for practicality.
Well, thank you so much. And do have a great time at your festivals.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to WGSN youth fashion strategists Mia and Jaeyeon for joining us and discussing festival fashion. If you're a WGSN subscriber, you can find a wealth of forecasts covering the topics we touched upon today within our fashion platform, including festival trend analysis, bi-monthly youth roundups, street style images, and further themes in our youth drivers forecast, which now features TikTok analytics data, key trading drivers, and product directions. If you're not a WGSN subscriber, head to WGSN to discover how to subscribe to our services. We're constantly publishing new content, focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries, including food and drink, interiors, cities, and beauty. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. You can catch CEO of WGSN, Carla Busashi, next week on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow, where they will be discussing accessibility in fashion with disability advocate Sinead Burke. Until next time, thank you for listening, and if you are going to a festival, remember, wear your comfies, hydrate, and be safe. See you soon.